I'm Andrew Ginter. Today we're going to go through our two brand new listing agreements. These two agreements are in response to what we need to do moving forward as far as what the settlement requires of us. So let's dive right in. All right, so here is the first of two listing agreements. Um, this listing agreement is almost no different from our current listing agreement. It still is, it's a listing agreement that causes us to share part of the commission that we are charging with a buyer's broker. So you'll see in the basic information right below what you've always seen, there's a generic statement. That is a statement that is settlement required as well as state required now. And then the listing commission section is really no different than what we've always done. So this is a listing agreement where you would charge what you've always charged, whether that's 7 or 6 or 5 or whatever, or some kind of graduated commission, anything you want to do. You'll put that right here along with a minimum. And then down below in this buyer commission section, that's the section where the seller's authorizing us to offer a piece of that commission to a buyer's broker if one should exist. So again, in this scenario, you would do things exactly the same as you've always done them. So really no changes here, except this now it takes out some of the language about the fact that we're going to pay the commission through the MLS. It takes out some of the semantics, but it doesn't really change the way we do business on this listing agreement. So this is what I'm currently titling broker compensation. Now, our second listing agreement, this is where it gets a little bit more unique. There is no right answer as to which one you use. It's whichever one you're more comfortable with. And potentially it's going to be whichever one you think will be more effective based on the seller you're working with too. For sellers who feel like this settlement changed things and changed kind of the way business is done, then this second agreement is probably going to be the more appropriate one for that person. And for some of you as agents, you may be more comfortable with this one, just depending on kind of how you feel about all this and maybe how comfortable you are with the way things always were versus the way things could be today. So on this agreement, you'll see this listing compensation section is different looking. It's a bit longer. In this one, you're going to be putting just the listing side of the commission being charged in the listing compensation section. So you're saying, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, you guys are hiring me to list and sell your property and represent you. So for that, I charge 3.5%, 4%, 3%, 2%, whatever your number is. That's how much you charge to represent them to sell their property. And that would go in this very first blank right here. And then the second blank is the minimum that you charge, right? So whatever that minimum might be, it would generally be a dollar amount. It would never be a percentage, because if it was a percentage, you'd be basically undercutting yourself over here. So generally that minimum has always been for lower end property where you may say, okay, I charge 3%, but I don't ever get paid less than $2,500 or $3,500 or $4,000. So depending on the sale price, that minimum would come into play. Then down below this other section for commissions, what that's for is if an unrepresented buyer buys your listing. So in that scenario, you may say, I'm charging 3% to sell your house, but if a buyer comes and they're unrepresented and there's no buyer's agent that we're going to offer any compensation to, I'm going to charge an extra 1.5 or 2 points or 1 point, whatever your number is. And you could put 0 in there. It's up to you. But that's something that I think, privately in conversations I've had individually with people, that's come up. The idea that if we're going to split the commissions on the listing agreement, and I'm saying I'm charging them 3%, and then we're saying that we're going to offer a buyer's broker 2.5% or 3% or 4%, whatever, that what happens if they don't have an agent? Like, I end up doing a bunch of that legwork, and in the past, I always made more money in those scenarios. So that's what that's there for. Use it however you see fit. right? But that creates the opportunity for you. Then down below in the buyer broker commission section, all this is saying is that the seller authorizes us to offer a commission to buyer's brokers to be paid by the seller. So it may sound like semantics, that there's a difference between the listing broker paying the commission versus the seller paying the commission, but there is a difference. There's a big difference. So on this agreement, the seller is the one offering the commission to the buyer's broker, not us. And one thing that could potentially cause is for that number to become a range of commission, not necessarily an amount. Whatever you end up doing here, like let's say the seller says, yeah, I'm willing to pay a buyer's broker commission, but it kind of depends on what the offer is. Okay. You could put 1 to 3% on that line. That's totally fine. And it's very important, though, that you communicate that exactly the same way to buyer's agents. So buyer's agent calls on your listing, and with this seller, they said that to you. So you guys put a range in there of 1 to 2.5%. It's really important that when you talk to that buyer's agent that you don't say that the seller's willing to pay a 2.5% commission, but rather that you say the seller's willing to pay anywhere between 1 and 2.5% towards a buyer's agent, depending on the offer and depending on what we can put together. So we don't want to put ourselves in a situation with this agreement where we are kind of committing to a buyer's agent one thing and then the seller counters with something different, because that could possibly put us in a kind of a precarious situation where we end up in some kind of arbitration or mediation, having to give up some of our commission because we said the seller was willing to pay a commission of X. And so that turns into kind of an offer of compensation to that buyer's broker. So do be careful with that. But again, the purpose of the second agreement is really for those sellers that see this settlement as a potential advantage for them, and for an advantage for like a change in the way business is done. Then this is the agreement for that seller, and you can use those 3 different commission places to accomplish whatever that seller's comfortable with. The important thing to note is that first one is the one that you're guaranteed to get paid for representing them. And then that second one, like I said, is for the nuanced situation where there is no buyer's agent and you're working for that person as a customer as opposed to a client and doing a lot of the legwork for both sides. If you guys have any questions about any of these, certainly feel free to reach out. I'm always here to help. Thank you for watching.